Okay, so chapter 10 is called skills. So the last bit I did at the chapter 9, I should have said here, but I digress. So Bergen Man says skills or techniques make you think about what you're doing, which is true. For example, I learned to cut hair. I had to just focus on cutting hair and not so much talk so much because I was so focused on cutting hair. It was so technical. But once I learned my skill as much as I can master it, I don't know if we ever master anything because I feel like that's such a anyway, I don't feel like we master anything. I feel like we keep learning. But as soon as I got comfortable doing it, cutting hair and doing the things that I needed to do, then learned how to talk to people more naturally or in a way that's not interrogated or techniqued. I can cut hair and talk at the same time. Of course, when you're learning, you can't do that. Probably same thing in sales, like if you're talking and you want to get to the point of the conversation where they're interested, you have to learn how to like dance with them a little bit. So I sort of quote unquote dance with the client while I cut hair. But it is true, they say here, they give a stat. 10% is specific knowledge or skill, and the rest, 90%, is people skills, which is very true. I used to tell people that cutting hair is a communication. It is so much based on communication. That's really what it is, right? If someone comes in and their hair color is messed up and they want you to fix it or haircut, some ways we have to console them or like, okay, so tell me what happened last time. What do you do at home for hair color, upkeep? Do you dry your hair? Like we have to ask the right questions to get to the bottom. So anyway, and we do this, and as long as you've been doing it, we learn it so much that we do it automatically and it just comes naturally to hairstylists. Asking the right questions about the hair. When was the last time they got the hair cut or hair color? Do they put heat on it? Do they put any chemicals on it? How often do they color it? All of the things we need to ask. And here it says, make it feel real. In another way, if someone is coming to you for a coaching, a health coaching, you have all the questions you need to ask or to ask them to get a better assessment, right? And then in this chapter, they talk about a formula called feel, felt, and found formula. It can be useful, but it can be obvious when forced. So sometimes this reminds me of, having a flow or a framework of some kind in your call or in your however you operate, right? In remote sales, it's like a sales call. It's probably similar in in-person sales. So sometimes the flow is there for us, but we don't necessarily have to enforce the flow in every single call. Sometimes you'll get to the first and second step and then you go off on tangent, and then you have to pull the person back to where you're leveled and back to the topic. Or sometimes, you get halfway through and the person is crying because you're asking when was the last time they felt happy, in their own skin, or if they're overweight, or what I mean. And sometimes, those questions are very personal, and we ask in a way that's gentle and caring. And sometimes, people cry or they go inward, or they don't want to share. So it's our job to provide like container for them to express those thoughts and feelings. And sometimes going off the framework or call flow is necessary in order to hold the container for them and acknowledge them and kind of, help them go through that emotion, whatever it is. And responding genuinely is far better than trying to guide the conversation. That's what I just mentioned a few seconds ago. Yeah, so it happens all the time in the hair industry. Like, you'll cut their hair, right? And they're happy so far. And you ask them, how was your day, And then they give you the answer like, where are you going for that celebration? And then they end up talking about who they're going with, right? And then you kind of probe, and if you're good at like conversation, you'll make them talk more about themselves, and then they'll tell you even more, right? And you're not a therapist, you're not a doctor, you're just a regular person. Sometimes they tell you too much or a lot, but it's funny, and it's like It is so mind-boggling that people just open up. It's pretty cool when I look back on my years of doing hair. People just open up to you about their personal lives. But I think that's the key, right? You want them to open up, and then when it's time, you'll be like, okay, when you're done, thank you, Barbara, so much. I'm so glad you love your hair. Let's see when we can book you next time. Like, you can like pull them back. That's just my way of kind of like pulling them back from where they were at, telling you about their whole lives. And they appreciate that, and then you can be like, my gosh, I hope you have a great birthday at such and such. You and your sister or aunts are going to have such a great time. I'll see you next time. Take care. Stuff like that. Yeah, learn to say the person's name. I have a hard time with this. I'm like 50-50. In customer service, it was hard. I would say it was more difficult for me because in a corporate salon, customers are so fast paced, like they come in and out if it's a busy salon. So that's why I say for me, it was hard, but I tried to do it. So most of the time I did remember. It's just sometimes I just can't remember because there's too many darn people that it's like like a revolving door. But I remember faces. I remember your face, and I remember the story you tell me. I just need a little bit of a starter, like this is such, and then in my brain goes, oh my God, I remember that story. And then you had a brother, right? And then you guys went there, right? That's the type of stylist that I was. Yeah. Okay, so going back to the framework, so you can have like a call flow, frame, reframe, or thing that you use in sales, right? And I quote here in this chapter, it says here, skill and techniques can be valuable, but part of sales life, but they need to be in perspective. So there's a time and place for them to be implemented, but if the situation doesn't call for it, don't use it. Skip the part and then go back to the part where it fits, Make it seem natural, like you actually care about somebody. I mean, you're in the business of people, sales, communication. Life is sales. I'm just going to keep saying it. Life is sales. But when in doubt, be yourself. You know what I mean? It's okay if there's pauses. If it's okay, you don't have to smile the whole time. You can follow their pace. That's what I normally do. Read the room. If they seem upset, don't ask too many questions. If they seem tired, don't ask too many questions. But that I'm coming from a hairstylist perspective. But yeah, go at their pace. Use the language that they use. Remember their name. Thank you for their time. Whether or not you see them again. But that's that. In this next chapter called Curiosity, Berg and Mann go over accessing your genuine curiosity to get to know someone. And in sales, we tend to make calls a lot. And if someone is nervous about making a call, especially to cold leads or anybody, they emphasize not thinking about yourself. Because when you say that you're nervous to make 20 to 200 calls, or it doesn't even matter how many calls, but just to make that call to a stranger, you're thinking about yourself. So one of the key things is to not focus on yourself in that way, instead to focus on the other person on the other line or the other person you're talking to in person. That way it takes off the anxiety and nervousness off of you, and then you're accessing your own genuine curiosity to find out more information about the other person, getting to know them, what's their story, why they need something, or what led you to having to call them. Also, they also state, be yourself. Even though we have like sales techniques, sales skills, and frameworks that we use, if that's not like something you can access naturally, don't use it. Or if you can access part of it naturally, then use what you can. But they emphasize on being yourself because according to the book, Go Give or Sell More, the unconscious mind can access billions of data bits and run millions of psychological processes simultaneously. That's a quote. And then by letting go of the conscious mind and just being yourself, you can access a lot more. And being yourself doesn't feel too salesy. And they also mention the idea of touching lives that we talked about before, like touching as many lives as you can to create more income. That's the idea, right? But in order to do that, in order to create major income for ourselves, we need to touch as many lives as we can. And in order to do that, we need to get to know a lot of people. So we need to really access our genuine curiosity for people, period. not in the possibility of them buying something from you. So that's the key point here. And of course, they always use good analogies, or at least imagery. And this one is about your attention is like a flashlight. It shines wherever you paint it. So basically, if you're nervous about what you're doing, then you're still thinking about yourself, right? You're saying to yourself, how am I doing this right? So in order to turn that around, we have to ask ourselves about the other person. The questions that come up is like, what's this person really like? What does she or he love to do the most? I think that feels more natural and less nervous, less anxiety inducing than the other questions that focus on yourself. So yeah, I think that helps to kind of reframe that mindset or perspective about reaching out to people and meeting people. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure a lot of you have come to a situation where there's people out there that just love talking about themselves when you're in a conversation with them and don't really ask you questions about you. I mean, not really, right? They don't. And yeah, so it's not genuine, right? It's not a good feeling. I mean, of course, it depends on the situation, but if it's like someone that has an offer, but they don't know how to market themselves, or they struggle to let people know what they do, but yet they're not interested in meeting people. So it kind of like defeats the purpose. But this curiosity chapter helps reframe that mindset of getting to know the other person. But yeah, focus on them, not on you. So this chapter is about maturity. And this chapter basically says to keep your focus on others' feelings while honoring or holding yourself accountable for your own feelings. And I quote the book here, people can lead you to feel, not make you feel. And I've experienced this before, probably many times in another life, and where the other person says, I made them feel this way, or I led them to this, or make them feel stressed. I don't make anyone do anything. But I think a lot of inner work to have or gain access to your own emotional maturity or emotional intelligence is pretty helpful when you are working with people. And yeah, we need self-control in order to be professional in whatever we do. I mean, it could be a non-work thing too. And they also say in this chapter, action comes before feelings, which is definitely true in a lot of cases or in a lot of situations. It's just like showing up for work, even though you don't want to show up for work, right? But you show up happy and grateful, to your 9 to 5 or 8-hour day job. And yeah, an example would be in customer service, obviously, right? I've done the phones before, and I've done the in-person. Yeah, I've done hair for like 12 plus years off and on during that time. You show up, you do the work, right? Even though you don't want to go to work every day, get your energy in check, right? Or if you're a customer service rep on the phone, sound like you're pleasant, even though you don't want to be at work. Right? But there have been many times where I had to call customer service for whatever reason. And, you can tell how someone's feeling by how they answer the phone. You can hear it in their voice. You can see it. You can sense it. Right? So, and also it's easier to be a pleasant person than it is to be an unpleasant person. And as for me as the customer, I always try to be pleasant as well. I always try to be as professional and pleasant as well, because I know the other person is working diligently, hard at work, So I think customers need maturity too, not just a salesperson. But that's just me. Yeah, because I've seen it so much. But that's what I would say. That would be like my 2 cents, that not only salespeople, but people in general need to have a sense of maturity if they want something from you, right? Let's say I'm the customer service rep and you're calling me and you have a tone with me just right off the bat for whatever reason because your day is messed up. Okay, fine, it is, right? But of course I'm going to be professional about it. But in my mind, I'm like, you're coming to me. Be nice, be pleasant. That's it. So, but again, if you're the type to get feedback or do the inner work, then you'll be more well off than the next person, right? So this is another reason why I do this, talk and make videos, is to practice speaking. We have to face ourselves, We have to admit the way that we feel without saying it and then acknowledging the other person. In the sales realm now, I was going off on a tangent a little bit, like I sometimes do. But like in a sales or work environment, yeah, absolutely. Like we all need to do some work within ourselves or improve how we're doing things so that we can be more effective with people. And that's all I'll say. Yeah.